today, we're plunging into something pretty unique. It's an author's personal diary entries.
Right, spanning almost 3 whole decades.
Yeah, starting back in 1997, believe it or not, and going all the way through to 2025. So our mission here is to figure out how this one person's view of, well, everything, technology, politics, society, art, how it all changed so dramatically over this really critical time in history.
It really was a critical period.
Get ready for, I think, some surprising predictions. And you really see this stark contrast between two kind of distinct eras in these notes. They're incredibly personal. It's a journey, really. Starts with optimism, then some early worries creep in, and then eventually it shifts pretty profoundly towards cynicism and even a sense of foreboding.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that you can pinpoint a moment where the author's whole outlook fundamentally changes. There's this critical inflection point, 9/11.
2001.
Exactly, September 11th, 2001. That event, it really serves as the dividing line, between these two big periods we're going to explore today.
Okay.
So we'll be comparing them, contrasting how that initial sort of wave of tech optimism and cultural change, how it gave way to these really deep anxieties, worries about political decay, the negative side of digital tech that maybe wasn't so obvious at first.
Yeah, the unintended consequences.
Precisely. And it's also interesting how the diary itself changes. It becomes more than just like a daily record. It evolves into a system almost, a deliberate way to capture ideas, maybe even to create art.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So we start February 1997. This is right on the edge of the dot-com boom, the new millennium. What strikes you first about that early period, say up to maybe December 2000? What was the feeling then?
Well, this first era, it's really marked by this powerful mix, isn't it? Tech optimism, definitely, but also some pretty big cultural shifts happening.
Right.
Politically, you've got the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal looming large, and the author saw that as evidence of journalism's deconstruction, was the phrase used.
Interesting. Deconstruction.
Yeah. Noting how the media's focus just shifted, didn't it? Away from policy towards personal scandal. And that changed its role as a gatekeeper, changed public perception of presidents, maybe irrevocably. And then you have the 2000 election, described as a dead heat. The author saw it as a kind of dress rehearsal for what was coming politically.
Well, dress rehearsal? How so?
Well, an early observation about how personality rather than actual policy was starting to really drive the outcome.
Right. That post-Y2K feeling, the euphoria, it seems almost quaint now, looking back. But even then, amidst all that technological renaissance, as the author puts it, they were picking up on glimmers of concern. How did they sort of square those early worries with that excitement? That feeling of worldwide euphoria is hard to recapture.
That's a great point. It seems they held both ideas at the same time, Like, on one hand, really excited about getting a 56K modem, imagine.
Yeah, I remember those.
But at the same time, already thinking about how faster information access might actually physically reshape our brains.
Whoa, early thoughts there.
Very early. And even with that worldwide euphoria after Y2K turned out to be, well, a non-event mostly, there were signs of deeper issues. The author mentioned an early dumbing down of America and chillingly predicted things like mass shootings in grade schools right after Columbine, seeing them through a generational lens.
Well, that's heavy.
It is. And then Napster pops up in '99, identified very specifically as the beginning of the music industry's ultimate demise. That's pretty prescient, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely spot on, yeah.
There's also this prediction that the internet would eventually be divided into web portals or channels based on our preferences, which is basically social media feeds. Right?
Exactly what happened.
And even then, concerns about just keeping digital stuff, archiving it, noting how flimsy digital things felt compared to, say, vinyl records.
It's incredible how many of those early thoughts really hit home later. What about art and creativity back then? That whole anyone can do it idea.
Oh, you see it directly in music. It leads to this explosion of alternative genres, right? The author starts playing around with generative music, these self-evolving computer programs.
Algorithmic creativity, even then.
Yeah, very early thoughts on it. And this is also when the diary starts becoming the system for, generating ideas, for songs, lyrics, a tool. But even with all that optimism, they were aware of the wider world. Wars in the Balkans get noted, Iraq conflict heating up. Terrorism was a concern, sure, but it was mostly seen as something external, or like a potential Y2K bug, weirdly. The overall mood, curiosity, some nervousness maybe, but strongly marked by that feeling of a new age.
And then
Yeah.
January 2001 hits, and you're saying this is where everything changes.
It really feels like it reading the entries.
That optimism just vanishes. And we entered this period that's dominated by, decline, cynicism, foreboding.
Pretty much, yeah.
What was it about 9/11 that felt so monumental to the author?
Well, 9/11 is clearly described as this monumental turning point. The diary records the initial shock and disbelief, obviously, but more than that, a sense of a profound shift in the collective psyche.
Okay.
It's labeled a milestone in world history, compared to the Titanic of the 21st century. But crucially, the author sees it as the moment the seed of division was planted in the U.S.
Wow. The seed of division.
Yeah. And from that point on, you see this growing alarm about American democracy eroding. Predictions of a slow-motion coup, a clear move towards dictatorship in the author's view.
That's a really unsettling vision. When they write about things like Project 2025 or the idea of no real elections, do they ever talk about how someone might resist that? Or is it purely observing this seemingly inevitable slide?
It seems largely observational, recording this grim sense of inevitability they felt.
And institutions like the Supreme Court, how do they fit in?
Oh, the Supreme Court is definitely identified as a key player in this perceived decline. Decisions granting presidential immunity, which the author saw as going way beyond typical executive privilege, potentially shielding actions from accountability seen as a blank check for evil.
Strong words.
Very. And then you get these explicit mentions of Project 2025. The author interpreted it as this detailed, coordinated plan aimed at restructuring the government, consolidating power in the executive branch, a way to, quote, destroy the country surreptitiously and imperceptibly.
Which leads to fears of no real elections down the line.
Exactly. U.S. politics starts being viewed more and more as just entertainment, a circus, politicians as actors, performers. Polarization, tribalism, described as divided 50-50, rampant. The author talks about the manufacturing process of public opinion, and the sharp decline of traditional journalism.
Yeah.
Ignorance and apathy are seen as these widespread societal problems, a concern that people are making a collective choice to be collectively dumb.
And the author links that to?
Believes it leads inevitably to fascism, authoritarianism. And this is where you see that phrase pop up again and again, and here we are.
Right, marking the fulfillment of those past fears.
Yeah. Fears about democracy declining, and the fear of the U.S. becoming another Balkans. Civil war seeming increasingly plausible. That becomes a recurring theme.
It's a genuinely bleak outlook. So technology, which started as a source of hope, now it seems to be a major part of the problem in this later period.
Oh, absolutely.
What was the specific critique of, say, social media and the internet generally?
Social media gets hammered consistently, seen as incredibly detrimental, fostering groupthink, hooliganism, creating a toxic political atmosphere, shifting everything from fact towards just opinion.
It's viewed as instrumental in fascist movement and pretty cuttingly as a let's be stupid together machine. And the internet itself, once this exciting frontier, is now seen more as a hype machine, a fire hose of information that just leads to short attention spans, erodes any kind of deep engagement.
And then comes AI, artificial intelligence. It seems to dominate the later entries, right? What's the core of their apprehension there?
AI becomes a major source of anxiety. It's seen as eroding creativity, authenticity, leading to this homogenization of content.
How so? Like in music?
Yeah, concerns about AI-generated music lacking that human je ne sais quoi, a fear it'll just make people more stupid. There's even this chilling fear mentioned of AI as a potential nuclear weapon.
Wow, that's serious.
Yeah. The author experiments with it, uses AI tools, but consistently notes the inaccuracies, the lack of, soul.
Soul, yeah. And even just basic communication has changed, right? Those hours-long phone calls people used to have, replaced by emojis, short texts, contributing, the author feels, to a sense of loneliness.
That makes sense. Other tech concerns mentioned.
Yeah, things like aesthetic erosion, just the sheer volume of photos being taken constantly, and the missing teeth of internet history, link rot, stuff just disappearing.
It sounds like a world just drowning in information, grappling with this really profound sense of decline. How does the author's own creativity, their art, hold up in this landscape, especially when music itself is described as dying?
Well, the author's Song Days project that evolves takes musical phrases from the daily diary entries to create new music, sometimes uses AI, but more for rapid prototyping.
Okay.
There's still this continuous exploration of creative systems, frameworks, but a really strong emphasis on manual creativity over just letting AI generate everything.
So a pushback against the tech, in a way.
Definitely. And that death of music idea is a recurring worry, especially as it becomes less valued, more driven by algorithms. Art generally seen as just reflecting popular culture, becoming about number scores, ratings, instead of genuine original ideas.
Looking beyond the U.S. then, how did the author see the global picture during this period, this time of growing cynicism? Was it all bleak, or were there any glimmers of hope anywhere?
Globally, the Iraq War in 2003 gets a lot of attention, very critical views on the justifications, the long-term fallout, often compared to Vietnam.
Right.
Climate change becomes this persistent, visible concern, observations about weird weather patterns, a sense of impending environmental disaster, warnings about World War III, global conflicts, they become frequent.
So pretty consistently bleak then.
The outlook is predominantly bleak and dystopian, yeah. For seeing a future where the world is completely different, if not inhabitable.
Grim.
But amidst all that, there's this surprising little bit of hope. A longing for a new 1960s zeitgeist sometime in the mid-2040s. A hope for some kind of cultural revolution revival.
Interesting. A flicker of optimism there.
A small flicker. The author acknowledges their own growing cynicism, definitely, but seems to find solace in personal routines, artistic creation, maybe a quiet kind of resistance.
It's genuinely striking, isn't it? How that initial optimism, that technological renaissance just sort of dissolved into this bleak and dystopian view. And 9/11 is clearly the pivot point.
It really stands out.
What really resonated with me, too, is how the diary itself changed. It wasn't just a record anymore, but became this creative outlet, a way to process this increasingly tough world, moving from just chronicling things to being a deliberate system for catching ideas, making art, almost in response to everything going on outside.
And if you pull all that together, those evolving concerns about the dumbing down of America, that manufacturing process of public opinion, and that really sharp critique of social media as a let's be stupid together machine, it points to much bigger societal things, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
That fear about AI eroding creativity, making people more stupid, even being like a nuclear weapon, what a contrast to that early excitement about the internet.
It's a huge contrast.
And that recurring phrase, and here we are. It just lands with such weight each time, underscoring how those past fears about democracy's decline, civil war, the U.S. becoming another Balkans, how they felt realized to the author.
Yeah.
So if we kind of connect this to the bigger picture, reflecting on how one person's private thoughts over decades can map out such a dramatic shift from optimism to this deep foreboding, it raises a pretty important question for all of us, I think.
Okay.
As information just keeps accelerating, keeps shaping our world in ways we're still figuring out, how do we get better at spotting those subtle signals, the signs of potential future turning points, before they become these huge, undeniable realities like the ones we've talked about today?